How should the Ravens rebuild their trenches? We'll talk about it next with a very special guest next here on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we return here with another episode of Locked On Ravens. I'm your host, Kevin Ostraker of Ravens Wire. Today's sponsor is Get Upside. Just download the free Get Upside app and use promo code Touchdown to get 25 cents per gallon or more cash back on your first tank. We return here. It is a Taco Tuesday, and back with us on Taco Tuesday after some Taco Wednesdays and some Taco Thursdays is Spencer Schultz of Baltimore Beatdown. Spencer, this Ravens team gave us about a week of just calm, and now they are pulling out all the stops in full force. How you doing today?
Doing quite well. It's been a nonstop cycle, especially in the Lamar Jackson era. So it'll continue to go, continue to have talking points, and we'll continue to have free agents like Justin Houston and Antonio Brown that we can touch on periodically for years at a time when it's slow, but it never is.
Yeah, I'm kind of wary of when the next Antonio Brown conversation will be, because it could be tomorrow, it could be next week with you. So, yeah, but the Justin Houston talk, hopefully we're talking about him re-signing in Baltimore in a couple months here. But Spencer, the Ravens have made a lot of moves. Obviously, the swap from Don Martindale to Mike McDonald. There have been a couple coaches who are not returning, such as Rob Ryan and also Drew Wilkins, but the Ravens over the weekend, I mean, there were just a myriad of things that did happen. The retirement of Dick Cass and his replacement, who's going to be Sashi Brown. You have the reports that Zach Orr's going to come in and be the inside linebackers coach for this team. There's the Pro Bowl, which many were not too happy about, and also not too happy about the Mark Andrews snub there. So, Spencer, what are your overall takeaways from just the myriad of news that happened this weekend for the Ravens?
Well, first off, Dick Cass has had a legendary run and done a lot of great things, been a part of 2 Super Bowl teams and been an integral part to the Ravens' success and been there for quite some time in that role of president for quite some time. He's always been a lovely man who eloquently speaks, engages with fans, puts on fantastic events, and has done a good job helping a Baltimore team that's not, Baltimore's not a huge market. It's not the smallest in the country, but it's certainly not close to the biggest. And having, Washington right down the road doesn't help either. So he's done a great job establishing their brand and helping them navigate some really outstanding contract situations and just being in the best interest of the Ravens from a business perspective. So you want to tip your hat to Dick. He's done an outstanding job and been in the fiber of who the Ravens are, the way they operate, and everyone that is in the castle working in sales, working in the outbound, front end part of the Ravens organization and making them have this classiness to them and have this air of winning, stable, competitive, and classy franchise. And Dick Cass has been a really big part in developing that, in having an environment professionally for people who work in all roles for the Baltimore Ravens, feeling respected, feeling like they are working for a place that they can tip their hat, or that they can feel really good about themselves and feel like they're working for a, really classy franchise. And I think so much of that is a result directly of Dick Cass and the way that he conducts business. Of course, working for Art Modell, working for Steve Bisciotti, 2 gentlemen that have had that same air of classiness to them overall. That's just the word that I'm going to keep coming back to. And I think Dick Cass has been a huge part of that. I've gotten to have a couple conversations with him in passing over the years, and it's always just been a really lovely man. And you want to wish him the best in retirement. I'm sure he'll still be involved loosely, just a little bit in some way, because the Ravens are certainly a part of who he is. But you tip your hat to him and transition to Sashi Brown, who has experience in the NBA now, and the way that NBA teams, work their contracts and do some cash dumps and things of that nature. So helping on the business side, Sashi Brown is a great legal mind, worked for an esteemed law firm, and has had time in the NFL, has had time in the NBA, very well respected. I would recommend looking him up on YouTube. He has a lot of great insight into the way that business operations work and contract language and the operations of a professional sports organization. So he's a well-spoken, well-respected man who is going to come in and continue to have that air of that classic legacy to him and be able to grow with the Ravens. And it'll be him and Eric DaCosta probably for quite some time here, it feels like. So those two will get to establish their legacy together in ways and continue to be part of the brain trust for Steve Bisciotti and making sure that they're at the cutting edge of football, and for bringing some new ideas that perhaps he could have won over from the NBA, and give a little bit of insight into the ways that the Ravens could take advantage of some contract language and incentives and structures and things of that nature to ultimately help them be in a better place. And I think a lot of people have kind of been confused. I think there's been a lot of, what does a president do? They do everything. They're the head of business operations. They're the president of a company. They're the face. They're the one that is making executive decisions inside the building in terms of what is going on, all the way down to interns, all the way through directors and senior level employees, mid-level employees, entry-level employees, all the way down to interns. So they're the one who's setting the stage, overseeing business operations, and also ultimately helping with contracts, contract language, and all sorts of, major decisions about the stadium experience, what goes on in the stadium, renovations that are going to happen in the stadium. What are other teams around the league doing? What is a profitable venture that the Ravens could seek to enhance themselves on, and things of that nature. So there's a lot to it, and it's something that I don't think gets really brought up until there is a change like this. So you see Dick Cass, who's done an outstanding job creating that incredible fan experience and having the Ravens be a top-notch organization, and you have to go ahead and think they picked Sashi Brown out, had him ready to go, and they're going to have a month period, I think, to have Sashi get up to speed on the way that Dick was doing things, and have Sashi then insert himself. And we hopefully will get a great game day experience and great relations, and have the Ravens continue to be this very classy, solid franchise that does things the right way and has for quite some time.
Yeah, it's certainly an exciting transition. Now, Dick Cass, you talked about it, Spencer. What he brought to this organization for years and years is so, so valuable. And just congratulations to him and his retirement, and wishing him the best in what he's doing. And yeah, it is. People, I think, were a bit confused about, hey, is Sashi Brown going to start, signing players and doing this, that, and the other? No, it's a group effort. Sashi Brown's going to work in tandem, with Eric DeCosta, with John Harbaugh. He's overseeing things, as you talked about. So, Dick Cass brought so much to this organization. Now Sashi Brown, he's getting that torch from Dick Cass, and, some of that will continue to be the same. But Spencer, with those coaching, I guess I'll call them changes. You have Drew Wilkins, who was widely regarded, throughout the organization as this young, up-and-coming, very good coach, not returning to the coaching staff. You have Rob Ryan also, same thing, except, he's wasn't necessarily young and up-and-coming. He has a lot more experience, but both of them are not coming back, and the Ravens reportedly are bringing back a familiar face in multiple ways, and Zach Orr to coach their inside linebackers. And Orr was somebody outstanding linebacker when he was healthy, but unfortunately an injury that just was not safe for him to play on cut his career short. He ends up coaching with the Ravens and leaving for Jacksonville to be a coach there. Now he's coming back. How do you feel about that, Spencer? Zach Orr coming back to Baltimore, and also the departures of Ryan and also Wilkins.
Certainly. I mean, Ryan's one of Wink's buddies, so feels like after Mike McDonald left, they kind of had a void and needed to bring somebody in who was experienced, and there wouldn't be a big teaching process, and they wanted to kind of hit the ground running. The Ravens defense was supposed to be one of the elite units in the NFL, and some injuries set in and some disappointment set in, and they really didn't. They weren't even that hurt overall, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about Rob Ryan. So Rob Ryan, feels pretty stocked that he's out. Zach Orr on the way in. It's a real shame that Zach Orr had that congenital neck disease that prevented him from being able to continue playing. I know that he really did want to. I remember that the Colts were supposed to sign him at some point, and there was this, Schefter was floating a rumor about that, and no team would clear him. Ultimately, they thought it wasn't in his best interest and didn't want to have that liability on their hands, but he, still wanted to play, and it was really heartbreaking that his career was cut short, but he has immediately, taken his teeth to the grindstone and bit off as much as he could chew, and continued to do so as an intern, as a defensive assistant, and then finally being a positional coach. He's 29 years old, super young, obviously, but the way that he played was incredibly cerebral, and he was sound as a pass coverage. He was sound as a pass rusher. He was a great processor against the run. He was athletic. He was physical. He had finesse to his game. He was a really well-rounded player, and you saw him work his way up through the Ravens, playing special teams, and then earning that weak side linebacker role a little bit with C.J. Mosley, and then dominating from there, having outstanding reps. So, you see Patrick Queen and L.J. Fort talking about how excited they are on Twitter, and you can't help but feel excited. The Ravens have yet another young defensive coach who is ascending, who feels like they were cut short and has a chip on their shoulder, and probably wants to really comes from a football family that has a huge legacy. Several NFL players, his brothers in the Panthers organization right now. It was a UDFA that signed with them and ended up making it to the active roster at some point last year, and wants to set his name out and become, a prominent figure the way he was supposed to be after his career was cut short. So you hope that he comes in, breeds physicality, preaches technique, gets guys like Patrick Queen to continue being physical and developing in that sense, and all those good things. So it feels like they have a young, active coach who is beyond relatable and someone that just was doing it a few years ago and is still so young. So for him to get that experience, for Joe Cullen to take him with him, give him that positional coach experience in Jacksonville, for him to get outside of the organization, much like Mike McDonald, see things through a different light, get a little bit more perspective, and then come back to the Ravens, I think is really exciting. So feels like they have a lot of young, hungry coaches on the defensive side of the ball. Anthony Weaver's still here, obviously, for now, who we'll see what happens with him. He did get some DC interviews and maybe is kind of, weighing his options. But if he ends up coming back as well, another young guy, another player, someone who's very well respected, very highly spoken of, and a lot of youth on this defensive coaching staff. And obviously Mike McDonald being the youngest defensive coach in the NFL. So I think that's really exciting. And I think we can see a new breed of energy that hopefully transpires as a result of the young coaching staff. And, they understand, Zach Orr understands, Anthony Weaver understands, and Mike McDonald understands, guys that all spent time with the Ravens organization for quite some time, what playing a sound, physical, imposing style of defensive football means to this city, to this team, to this organization, and being in the division that they play in. So hopefully we see a new era of Baltimore Ravens defense that comes with it, and it still has the homage to the old era. So just a little modern twist to it, and that's what I think we're all hoping for.
Yeah, they're getting the band, or I guess bands, back together by kind of bringing in these different era of Ravens players or coaches. With, you talked about Weaver and now Orr and McDonald, who was there for a while now. But yeah, it's exciting. I'm excited that Orr is coming back. It felt like when he left for Jacksonville was kind of like oh man, well, it would have been really nice if the Ravens could have kept him and continued growing him throughout the organization. But one of your last points there was really key, Spencer, and something I've talked about with Mike McDonald, and you mentioned it too. Leaving and seeing stuff through a different lens, not having that organizational pressure to do this or do that. He left and he grew in a different setting. And I think that's great, coming back to an organization where, he's not necessarily getting pressured or anything, but, it's bringing in new ideas and bringing in new concepts that I think helps these guys grow. So for McDonald to not do it in the organization, for Orr not to do it in the organization, and to come back to a successful franchise, I think that's really, really key. But we'll head into our first break. When we get back, we'll be diving into how the Ravens can fix up their trenches, both on offense and on defense. So stay tuned for that. And we will be right back. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as football continues to march through the playoffs right to the big game in a couple weeks. BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just football. BetOnline is up-to-the-minute info on props and on pro and college hoops, and that's NHL, boxing, UFC, along with live and real-time updates of current games. The way to take advantage of all the new amazing offers available for the 2022 season. BetOnline, where the game starts. Hey, Ravens fans, this is Kevin Allstriker with the incredible app everyone who buys gas needs to know about, in Get Upside. Just download the free Get Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now and use promo code TOUCHDOWN for 25 cents per gallon or more on your first fill-up cash back. Don't pay full price of the pump anymore. Get cash back using Get Upside. Just download the app for free and use promo code TOUCHDOWN for 25 cents per gallon or more on your first tank. Some people who drive a lot are making as much as $200 to $300 per year in cash back, and there's no catch. The cash back is added right to your account. You can cash out anytime to your bank account, PayPal, or any gift card for Amazon and other brands. Just download the free Get Upside app and use promo code TOUCHDOWN to get 25 cents per gallon or more cash back on your first tank. That's code TOUCHDOWN. We're back. It's our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Allstriker still here with Spencer Schultz of Baltimore Beatdown. And Spencer, we heard it a lot over the last week from John Harbaugh and Eric DeCosta as well about rebuilding the trenches a little bit, both on offense and on defense. Now, both areas, I think, were subject to some criticism, but also some pretty solid play. I mean, on the offensive side of the ball, on that offensive line, you had Bradley Bozeman play at a high level. Kevin Zeitler played at a high level. But the Ravens, they banked on the health of Ronnie Stanley. It did not pay off. Alejandro Villanueva, I'll say it again, consistently inconsistent for him. They had Patrick McCary, who was a very nice surprise, but couldn't really stay healthy towards the end of that season. Left guard was kind of a turnstile between Tyree Phillips and Ben Powers and Ben Cleveland. Then on defense, you have Calais Campbell, Brandon Williams, both hitting free agency, potentially retiring at this point. Derek Wolfe, his health. We don't really know right now what he's going to be coming back if he does come back. You have young guys like Justin Madubuike and Broderick Washington. But Spencer, how big of a priority is it for you, for the Ravens, to rebuild these trenches, and how would you do it?
It certainly is the utmost priority at this point. I think primarily on the offensive side of the football. I'll start by saying or asking in rhetoric, what is the Ravens' offensive line's identity? I don't think they have one. They've been mauled by injury. They've been marred by Orlando Brown not wanting to play for the Ravens at right tackle anymore, getting him out. Ronnie Stanley's not there. So they have no identity. They're a group of offensive linemen that have been acquired through different methods that play, some okay football at times. And there's no name. There's no outside media going and saying, wow, look at this guy, look at that guy. Kevin Zeitler had a nice year and was nice in pass pro and for sure, but there's no fear factor to go line up against the Ravens offensive line and get after them. They don't impose their wills on anyone. There's no tenaciousness. There's no tenacity. There's no nasty. And that's where I think they need to find an identity. They need to go out and find some nasty dudes. With Tom Brady retiring, I would expect Ryan Jensen to be deplorable or open to being moved, I guess is a better way to put it. In Tampa Bay's situation, they're going to have to do an entire organizational reshift, most likely. And I think Ryan Jensen is probably going to be on the way out. So if Bradley Bozeman doesn't come back, Ryan Jensen is much more nasty than Bradley Bozeman. Different points in their career right now, but Jensen's played a lot of consecutive games. You knock on wood for him right there, but he's nasty. You can go look at a Trevor Penning in the draft. You can go look up and down. There's a Daniel Falele who, a guy maybe get in the second or third round that can impose their will in the run game and just cave holes in the sides of defenses. So I think they need to get nasty on the offensive side of the football. We have watched Lamar Jackson. There are other factors that go into it, but really when you look at 2020, when he had a tough stretch of play, it had to be a direct result of him feeling uncomfortable in the pocket and uncomfortable with his protection. When Ronnie Stanley went down, when things shifted around, when they were going Matt Skura coming off of a triple knee tear to Ben Powers to Tyree Phillips and DJ Fluker platooning at right tackle, Lamar Jackson was on his toes more. He was, ready to run more. His eyes were dropping quicker, and he had a rough stretch of play. Fast forward to 2021. The same thing happened to a degree. He also did start missing some practices and things, but we've watched, you can almost feel when Lamar Jackson consistently doesn't trust his offensive line, the pass game crumbles. And the Ravens need to do something about it. And I think it is to get nasty. I think it is to make a group that defenses fear in a way. And I think Ben Cleveland, who I don't want to speak poorly of him at all, but he's not a nasty player. He's not much of a finisher in either the run or the pass game. He's really a finesse player that looks like a WWE wrestler. He's really smart. He has a really sound technique as a pass protector, but he's not this mauling downhill, bear that comes down and beats you up. That's not his game, and it's not going to be. So I think that gave them a little bit of a misconception to fans just kind of because of his physique and maybe some things that some journalists kind of put out through training camp or some people who cover the Ravens put some things out. So they need to go back and find a nasty identity. And on the other side of the football, versatility, I would say, is the identity of what the Ravens front has been. Madubuike ends up playing a bunch of 5-tech. You can slide down, play some shaded 1-tech in your 2-4-5 third down look since your different fronts. Broderick Washington, a guy who can play 3 and 5-tech. Calais Campbell's moved up and down. Brandon Williams, a nice run defending nose tackle who really gives you nothing as a pass rusher. So they versatility, I guess, is the identity there. But now could be without Calais Campbell, maybe not. Justin Houston, we'll see. I don't think there's any reason he wouldn't come back if the Ravens showed that they wanted him, unless he, didn't feel that they were going to be competitive or something. So it's just continuing to reload, restock. I think that the Ravens have lacked harmony of having a interior pass rusher who can finish to a degree. Part of that goes hand in hand with their scheme. They wanted to make guys get the ball out quickly and throw into the teeth of their defense. Wink spoke many times about how he wanted free rushers as opposed to, the 4-man rush and all those things. So Mike McDonald's going to do both of those things a little bit more so. But getting that interior pass rush up to speed, going and finding someone who can be a dominant 1, 2, 3, 4 tech pass rusher would be fantastic. Campbell has been that at points in his career, but suffered that Achilles injury last year. and it's been tough for him to come back. He also faces a lot of double teams that I don't think people realize. He's one of the most double team defensive linemen in the NFL, top 6, I think. So it's been a little bit tough for him, but done a nice job, gets pressure, clogs passing lanes. But other than that, Matabike, I was very high on as a pass rusher. I still am. I don't know that he's got that finish to him, that turning a pressure into a sack to him, something he needs to work on. But they need to go reload. They need to go find some able young bodies that can move. Oftentimes they end up relying on those kind of stopgap plus third, fourth contract veterans, which turns out quite well for them. So I'm not shocked if they go in that direction, but sometimes it bites them a little bit. Derek Wolfe is someone they did that with, and he didn't play this year. So he certainly could have helped and has a little bit of a presence as a pass rusher in ways. There's guys like Akeem Hicks and some other names out there that they could bring in, but there's also some interesting names in the draft, some guys that popped up at the senior week. So I think it's more of just a reload on the defensive side of the football, but the offensive side of the football, still a lot of questions, and they really, in ways, are at the absolute mercy of Ronnie Stanley's ankle and foot. So it's a tough situation, and they're probably going to have to overcompensate in order to ensure that they don't get marred again by Lamar Jackson not feeling like he has a great offensive line. Many quarterbacks struggle with that. Joe Burrow, we've watched kind of elevate above that and have like a God level run as a quarterback to be able to navigate through that. And it definitely, it already took a toll on him once last year, and he's, running away from Chris Jones, making plays with his legs, doing some crazy things, but that is the outlier, not the norm. We've seen Lamar Jackson do that, but it's really hard to keep doing it over and over and over again. And especially when you're missing training camp, missing practices, other guys are hurt and missing practice, missing training camp, and you didn't really get that good continuity throughout the summer. And then in the season, guys are beat up, so practices ends up being a little bit lighter. When you've got 20 guys on the IR, you're probably not going to be going that hard in practice because you really can't afford to lose anyone else. So there's a variables out the wazoo ultimately, but got to go get some nasty and bring it to this offensive line, get that identity back, and get an offensive line that gets so good that people are talking about it again. National media is saying, man, the Ravens unit is nasty. Brian Baldinger's going bam, bam, bam in a video. I think that's what they need. Lamar Jackson's super mobile, super capable. They've got some weapons, so it's time to completely, build Fort McHenry a second time in Baltimore and let Lamar Jackson make plays. He likes to take his time back there sometimes. He likes to feel like he can hold the ball and save out for the big play, and maybe that's something he'll transition to more, once he gets into his late 20s and 30s. But right now, he likes to hold the ball a bit, likes to go for the throat, and they need to allow him to do that. So you can honestly, and especially if that contract situation doesn't end up coming to fruition this year, you would like to be able to evaluate him in a vacuum and feel like there's nothing preventing you from giving that honest evaluation that, oh, well, it was tough because the offensive line, wasn't great. So, there's excuses and things like that. So to feel super confident in Lamar Jackson, I think you give him that great offensive line, you invest resources, and I think the Ravens are absolutely going to do that. They have methodically invested through free agency and the draft and double dipping in the draft in the receiver room and the edge room and the wide receiver room. So, the eye of Sauron will finally turn to the offensive line where 3 years ago, they had a Hall of Famer, an All-Pro, and a Pro Bowler. And then this past year, they had none of them. So it's been quite the 180, and it's time to 180 back and flip it back right side up and get this show on the road.
Yeah, 2019, that unit you were talking about there with Marshall Yonda and Orlando Brown Jr. and Ronnie Stanley. And we saw that year with a not just competent offensive line, but a really, really good one. Lamar Jackson led the league in touchdown passes. He took his time back there. He was able to do his thing. Whether you want to talk about week 1 against Miami or whatever, he was just sitting back there, letting that thing go and connecting on huge plays. He was able to use his legs the way he wanted to. And you fast forward to 2021, and it seemed like every play, the tackles were getting pushed inward. Lamar Jackson had to run out of the pocket. He was under pressure. He had to make decisions. That clock was sped up. And we saw him during the 2021 season when he did have time in the pocket. I mean, he was in the MVP conversation. That Colts game was like is Lamar Jackson going to win another MVP? And then it kind of slows down. Week 10 happens, and it just goes belly up from there. But you talk about some of the stuff that happened in training camp, Spencer. I think that is where it started. And you made a good point there because Kevin Zeitler missed weeks, and Bradley Bozeman missed weeks, and Ronnie Stanley didn't come back until about midway a bit through there. So you mentioned it, there wasn't consistency on that offensive line. The guys didn't get time in training camp, or at least not as much as you would want them to. And then, when the Ravens did put out their full starter group, it was disaster with the whole J.K. Dobbins thing. And, John Harbaugh was like, we were going to pull him here, pull him there, but they just didn't get that time. I think it translated. The injury to Stanley doesn't help things. And you're right. They're almost at the mercy of that injury, which is unfortunate. But with a player as talented as him, you kind of have to bank on it, but actually overcompensate this time, because I think that's where the importance comes in of saying, look, if Ronnie Stanley isn't going to be able to come back from this, at least we have other options, as opposed to, all right, we're going to bank all of it on this. And if it doesn't happen, well, we're going through another 2021. So I think it's important in that regard. But we'll head into our final break here. When we get back, we'll be diving into a recap of the entire Senior Bowl week. So stay tuned for that, and we'll be right back. This episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure from pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts in their computer, choosing the only brand the warehouse happens to carry? You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. You can save time and money when using Rock Auto. It's a family business. They've been serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years, and their prices are reliably low for every customer. So go to rockauto.com right now and see other parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On, that has you hear about us box so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, other parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. We're back. Our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oshak, your host, still here with Spencer Schultz. And Spencer, you were down there in Mobile looking at these prospects for senior week, and the game happened over the weekend, and all eyes were on players like, Malik Willis, and you have others like Kenny Pickett. But for the Ravens, they're not looking at a quarterback. There are other players who I think had great weeks, a great game. And I want to get your opinion, Spencer, just on who the risers and fallers were for you this week, and also who, after looking at these guys and figuring out what their strengths and weaknesses are based off what you saw, could be good fits for this Ravens team.
Certainly. Again, that defensive front really stole the show. And Jalen Johnson, I spoke about ad nauseum last time, but don't need to talk about him. Wouldn't be shocked if he's someone that the Ravens have in their mind at 14 in the first round. I think that's around 13 through 20 is where I think he's going to end up going, that type of player. But moving on from him, Rashad Bateman's former teammate, Boye Mafe, an explosive, twitched up, very quick edge rusher that can win with speed, that has enough power to his game where you think he can probably develop a little bit more into a more every down player to a degree. Perion Winfrey out of Oklahoma was outstanding. Prodigious length, quickness, counters, tons of explosiveness and speed from the get-go. A really intriguing kind of mid-round, later-round guy maybe. Atito Ogbonna, who from UCLA. He is a 0-1, maybe 2 tech. Probably could play a little 3 tech for you if you wanted, but a little undeveloped still, but absolutely incredibly explosive. He weighed in about 327 pounds. Does not look it at all. Looks like he's, more of an athletic power lifter than somebody who, would be like, oh, he's 330 pounds. He can move. He's got a crazy bull rush, tons of explosiveness. He hustled back after every single rep, and you can tell that there's a lot of development for him there still. So I think that he was a really exciting interior pass rusher. And Travis Jones out of Connecticut, man, really wowed consistently. And in these drills, there usually ends up being per team. So there's the national and the American team, 3, maybe 4, and depending on injuries and opt-outs and things, and who they can get, maybe 3 or 4 interior defensive linemen. Sometimes, depending on the day, it can be 2. So when they're doing these one-on-ones, when they're running through team drills and doing all of these things throughout, a 3.5-hour period, you end up seeing the same defensive linemen going rep after rep after rep after rep, or, break here, but all these fresh offensive linemen. There end up being 10, 11 offensive linemen, guys that are subbing in and out left and right. So you can understand when guys start to wear down a little bit. And there were a couple of reps where Travis Jones would go against somebody for the first rep, and you could see he was a little bit tired. And you would absolutely understand, late in the day 2, day 3, if he mailed it in a little bit. He did not. If he did not win the first rep, he came back every single time and violently won. His ability to work through and initially lose to even guys like Zion Johnson, who might be a first round or probably is going to be a top 40 pick as an interior offensive lineman, to lose initially, get his, give up his chest and continue to just work with his hands and his explosiveness to refit and be crafty. He's what I like to call pass rush black belt certified. He's got the karate to him, the karate hands, and violently powerful with his counters, his clubs, his humps, his, everything that he can throw shocks guys. It completely moves their upper body out of the way. He's someone that I think would be the polar opposite of Brandon Williams as a pass rusher. He's got more size, he's got more length, he's got more explosiveness to him, and he can counter much, much, much more effectively. So I think he's a really intriguing option for the Ravens. If he makes it to 45, I think they could do a lot worse than him. If his name got called on day one, I'm not shocked, especially in wouldn't say a thin, but not a robust interior defensive pass rushing class. We also saw another hybrid type defender, Logan Hall out of Houston, very long, very strong, 5 tech, 3 tech, outside linebacker type, can move around in sub packages, just has a ton of rhythm and a ton of nuance to his movements. And he's a matchup problem athletically for a lot of blockers. So those are a couple of guys I think that flew under the radar just a little bit that were super, super impressive. I spoke about Jalen Petrie last week. He ended up, turning in a really nice day 3 and a really nice game in Mobile, high level nickel slot, safety hybrid type player, matchup player underneath. You think of young Tyrann Mathieu or Elijah Molden. He had an awesome week. We heard Eric DeCosta for the Ravens when he did his little, selfie video, Mobile, talk about video, whatever you want to call it. Talk about Josh Williams from Fayetteville State. Really just finished reps really well and fought through, found the catch point, and got the ball out. So I was impressed with him in coverage in many ways. He's a DB. Can play some corner, play some safety for you a little bit. And then the other guy that fits the Ravens' MO, and I'll make a little bit of a Chris Westry comparison, is Tariq Woolen out of UTSA, University of Texas, San Antonio. He had just 6'4", 210, I think, 205, 210. So he's not, a beanstalk, and was a former wide receiver. So he's got ball skills. He went to UTSA as a receiver, and you just see him get better every year there. And his transitions, his ability to close, his recovery speed, his hips are so fluid for a guy at his height. And I think that he's got even a little bit more upside than a Chris Westry. I think his game is a lot more developed coming out of college than Westry's was. And he hit 22.5 miles per hour, the fastest of anybody who's been in Mobile since they started tracking the GPS in their pads in the last couple of years. So he's got speed to burn. He's got some ball skills. He's not afraid to be physical. And he's the Ravens type, man. They like those long, strong press corners, the Jimmy Smiths of the world. And he fits that profile. So I think he's definitely someone to watch out for. Alontae Taylor has a little bit of Marlon Humphrey to his game in terms of don't throw a screen at him because he will wreck it. He will blow it up. He did it at Tennessee. He is going to do it again in Mobile, and he's going to do it in the NFL. Has some really nice recovery skills. And I think this DB group overall, guys like Cam Taylor-Britt's very physical. Mario Goodrich, known as the other corner from Clemson, who could be, a top 50 guy as well. Roger McCreary, tons of capable bodies down there that could really make a difference. In terms of the offensive linemen, looking through, there was a couple standouts that were maybe some mid-round guys. The first one that comes to mind is Ed Ingram out of LSU and Dylan Parham as well. I'll group in there. Both of them just had really solid weeks. I think Ed Ingram was voted the offensive lineman of the week for the American team and just refit really clean. And his reps were really boring. And when you say that about an offensive lineman, it means that they're not getting beat and they're just shutting guys down. Parham played center. He reached really well. He's probably, both these guys probably going to be third-round guys, fourth-round guys, somewhere through there. So I was very impressed with them. Also, additionally, Jamari Sailor out of Georgia, and his teammate Justin Schaefer is a little bit of a later-round guy. But Jamari Sailor, not the most athletic guy. You can see there's a little bit of stiffness to his game. He's also about a hair under 6'3", but he's got long arms, according to the measurements there. And you see him just win. And he's not this dynamic athlete. He's not someone who's, has the most beautiful kick steps out of their stance and is exploding and throwing guys on the ground all the time. But man, he just wins his hands. His reps are, kind of like I mentioned, Ed Ingram, just kind of boring to watch because he just continues to win over and over and over again. He has played left tackle. He's played left guard. He's played right guard. He's played right tackle. It's really everywhere but center. And you're confident that he can play because of that. He's going to be able to be someone who's playable earlier because that you're going to get that versatility. A lot of people have him as a guard. He is a little bit short, but didn't seem to be absent in length there. So someone I could see playing, left guard, right tackle for the Ravens, I think is a really good fit as well. teammate of old Ben Cleveland down there. Running back wise, I mean, not shocked to see the Ravens maybe add a running back day 2, day 3 in this draft. And I was really impressed by Damien Pierce out of Florida. I think a lot of people were. Just physicality to boot. He doesn't really have runaway speed, but he can fly through his second and third gear. He's got explosiveness. His pass pro is insane. There's physicality. There's decisiveness. He can cut guys up a little bit. He was very impressive. Brian Robinson Jr. out of Alabama, who everyone's very familiar with, had a nice week. Saw the same things. Exceptional in pass pro. I think he was voted running back of the week by his teammates. Just does everything right, does everything the right way. Feels like a veteran. He is a little bit older as a prospect, but he's going to come in and play. Moving on to the wide receivers, Calvin Austin III is a name to watch out for. I think that he's going to be a little bit more dangerous than a Tutu Atwell, who was at Louisville and ends up going to the Rams. Austin has a little bit more functional strength and is just built a little bit thicker in the trunk and can fly. Toasted dudes and speed releases constantly. Really smooth mover, super competitive, and blew the doors off of cornerbacks nonstop. And then finally, I'll talk about Jalen Tolbert and Christian Watson. Jalen Tolbert out of South Alabama, which is Mobile. That was their facility that the Senior Bowl is at. Jalen Tolbert's got a little bit of speed to him, got a little bit of finesse to his game, and isn't afraid to make catches over the middle. You see some really nice late adjustments to balls, some really nice release packages from him. And I think that he's going to be a nice player. And then finally, kind of on the wide receiver side, the Ravens could stand to add a receiver, that could play outside and allows Hollywood Brown to maybe move inside a little bit more, and someone other than Rashad Bateman to take those snaps. You're going to need an X and a Z, and then Mark Andrews and Hollywood Brown and all kinds of things. So Christian Watson, man, some people are saying he's going to be a first rounder. I think that's a little bit rich for my blood, but probably a day 2 player. High day 2 player, possibly, who's 6'4", 210 pounds. North Dakota gave him, I think, 50 carries last year, and I think like 47 of them were jet sweeps. Lined him up in the backfield a couple times, but can do it all. Really can move his body, kind of like Martavius Bryant. 6'4", but can split release, can square release, can give you every kind of release off the line of scrimmage. He can play big, he can play small, he can play with speed, he can finish. Is a willing body in the run game, and he's got versatility to him in terms of being that wide back, as Deebo Samuel likes to call himself. So I think we'll see some people making that comparison. He's not going to go run guys over and be a real running back, but he was an all FCS, all-American returner. As a kickoff returner, I think he averaged 31 yards a return. So tons of explosiveness. He can give you some yards after the catch, and the wide receiver group wasn't anything crazy. A couple guys, Romeo Dowles, and I think we were all disappointed that Jahan Dotson out of Penn State wasn't there, but ultimately was a nice week for those guys. Khalil Shakur's got some nice releases out of Boise State. And then I guess I will end with the tight ends there. Trey McBride, Charlie Kohler, Jeremy Ruckert, tons of guys making plays. Isaiah Likely was there early, and Greg Dulcich out of UCLA. All kinds of flavors, and some of them can get it done in various ways. Trey McBride kind of reminds you maybe a little bit of a smaller Dallas Goedert. Not the most shifty guy in the world, but just gets it done in the pass game, gets open, great hands, movable in the run game, can have him be attached to the line of scrimmage and execute some nice blocks. Not very twitchy, but crazy good hands. Had a prolific year at Colorado State. I think he's going to be a second, third round player. And Jeremy Ruckert and Jake Ferguson, 2 Big Ten guys at Ohio State and Wisconsin. Both of them, you can put them in line. You can ask them to block. I like Jeremy Ruckert a little bit more overall, but both of them can get explosive out of breaks, can make DBs kind of miss in coverage a little bit, and are able to go finish reps. I think Ruckert's going to be a really nice NFL player that the Ravens could sneakily, bring in another guy, especially if Pat Ricard walks, which feels like it's up in the air right now. You could bring him in and have him be a better blocker than a Hayden Hurst and a more capable pass catcher than a Nick Boyle, who is still recovering from that really horrific injury. So definitely some really intriguing options in Mobile. There's a ton more. There's linebackers, all kinds of good stuff, but really intriguing options. Cole Strange on the offensive line, Trevor Penning, a couple more names to watch out for, some smaller school guys. But overall, there was a ton of talent there, and the Ravens will probably end up with 4 or 5 guys that were down there, as they always do.
Yeah, I was just about to say, it seems like they're going to get a couple of these guys. And kind of like a last question for you, Spencer, you mentioned that video that Eric DeCosta put out, the selfie video. He's obviously very excited about a lot of these players that are down at the Pro Bowl. And he's done this, he did it last year as well. Is that a smokescreen from him? Is that Eric DeCosta? There were the comments. I saw a couple of them that say, "Oh, is this just a smokescreen? DeCosta's throwing out names. He's going to go complete 180." Or is he really saying, "Hey, look, these are guys who we really could draft, and it's not giving away secrets, but saying, yeah, these are guys we're looking at.
Well, he spoke about Tylan Wallace last year. Called him a super explosive and physical player. And lo and behold, Tylan Wallace is getting snaps in the Ravens offense in 2021. So, or a little bit more in 2022 in those last couple games, but 2021, 2022. So I think there is some gravity to it. He's just talking prospects. He wants to be open, get guys to, it's very unique. You don't see GMs doing that, taking a selfie video and not blinking once the entire time and rattling off a couple. It's very personal. And I don't know, it has a nice kind of fireside chat feel to it in a way. And he loves his Coca-Cola, his Dunkin' Donuts, and his NFL draft prospects. But he did talk about Daniel Falele, who is a favorite of mine. I think has a lot of similarities to Orlando Brown. He's much more raw in terms of technical refinement, but has a ton of room for growth. He mentioned him, said he'll be gone by the end of the third round. And to me, that was like, yeah, he'll be gone by the end of the second round as well, and possibly higher than that. So if I had to bet on any of those guys he mentioned, I'd say Daniel Falele and maybe Joseph Williams as well. But Falele, I think, would be a perfect match down there. I could write a thesis on him. I have many, many thoughts, but overall, you can tell that he's a raw player. He's been playing football for 4 or 5 years, and his best move is a snatch and a trap where he hits guys' arms down and shoves them into the ground. He didn't even try that once in Mobile. And so to me, that says he's trying to learn his fundamentals and go to other things, have other options. So that was really interesting to me. I actually made a cut up of him doing snatches and just dominating dudes in the Big Ten. And then you don't see him even try one throughout his week in Mobile. So he's working on stuff. And if I had to put my money on somebody that ends up in Baltimore from the guys he mentioned, it would be Mr. Daniel Falele.
Yeah, I don't think he's smokescreen either, and I agree. I think it's an awesome thing that he does there just to get, a bit personal with the fans and saying like, hey, look, we're excited about a lot of these guys, so I don't think it's him saying, hey, look, NFL teams, these are the only players on our board, because that's not how it is. But he's saying we're excited about these players, and there probably will be a Tylan Wallace, as you mentioned from last year's video, that does end up in Baltimore. And if it's Falele, I think it's a pretty good one to end up with, in my opinion there. But Spencer, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for hopping on here, talking football with me. And you mentioned that cut up of Falele. What content do you have coming out here over the next couple of days and couple of weeks?
Yeah, I'm looking at the cornerbacks a little bit. I've gotten into some Sauce Gardner tape. I'll be getting into some Derek Stingley tape and some more Andrew Booth tape, looking at those guys. I think corner or edge rusher is really intriguing for the Ravens in the first round. So I'm probably going to steer there a little bit. And then continuing to get back to the Baltimore Beatdown Big Board, which we're doing on the Baltimore Beatdown podcast. We'll probably be coming to that, I guess, beginning of March, maybe last week of February. So that'll be something coming along. Trying to figure out, Jake, Luke, myself, trying to figure out who is the best prospect for the Ravens at 14. We make a 16-player big board, do a deep dive into every single position, pick a couple favorites out of it, and then we roll from there. So that's something we're excited about. We're doing our second year, having some fun guests on, and going to be a lot of fun. So you can find the Baltimore Beatdown podcast anywhere you can find the Locked On Ravens podcast.
Yeah, be sure to check it out. And that link to the Baltimore Beatdown podcast will be in the description below, along with Spencer's Twitter. And hopefully we'll get some purple prospect portfolios over the coming weeks and coming months. The name can be a little tough to get at first, but don't worry. If you try and you try again, you'll get it. It happened to me, and now I have it down. But Spencer, thank you again so much. Be sure to check out Spencer's work. But that's all I have for you today here on Locked On Ravens. When we get back here tomorrow, we'll be answering your mailbag questions. So stay tuned for that, and I'll see you tomorrow.